All right, so this screencast is linked to lecture series number 4, which is project proposal. This should be project proposal writing and presentation, but it doesn't matter. Project proposal document presentation. And we are going to transition to the next part of the lecture, which is centered around the structure of the proposal document itself. Now, before I start, right, I guess it's important to highlight a very important aspect of the proposal itself, and this is probably the part that most people are interested in, the grading part, right? You want to pay particular attention to how the proposal is going to be graded, and specifically, I would like to draw attention to the part of the group proposal assignment that has the grading rubric, right? So if you scroll down to, I think it should be page number 3 or something, or page number 2 rather, you will notice that there's a sort of like mark distribution associated to the different aspects of the proposal, right? What you will realize is that the content, right, the specific content associated to the proposal accounts for 60% of the project proposal grade, right? 30% goes towards project management, and then 10% is linked to styling and formatting, right? So issues to do with grammar, for instance, and adherence to the to the prescribed, not the word here, prescribed, not recommended, the prescribed reference style, which is then is going to be SCM, right? So you want to, again, remind yourselves of this breakdown of the grade associated with the proposal. All right, so what we're going to do is just quickly walk through the key elements associated with the proposal, right, that you want to pay particular attention to. And incidentally, right, if you look at the outline of this particular section of the lecture series, these are some of these are actually directly mapped onto the sections that we expect to find in this proposal document that you're working towards, right? So like any piece of academic writing or piece of writing, obviously, proposal document is expected to have a title, right? A title that is supposed to be representative of what it is you are working towards, right? It should not be same piece of text, rather verbatim piece of text that is linked to the topic that you chose. It should be representative of specifics of what you're going to be doing. Again, I'm going to refer you to 2034 because this was discussed in 2034. You want to make sure that you come up with an appropriate title. There are marks associated with this. The key thing is it should reflect what it is you're working towards. What you should also do as part of, not that this is the title really, but if you look at the template we're going to be using here, you must also clearly list all the group team members, their full names, their affiliations, and their contact details. And their contact details here would be their email addresses, right? So what we expect to find, and you see this from the ACM template that you'll be using, is a format similar to what you're seeing here, right? Name of the person, the department, which is Department of Library Information Science, University of Zambia. If you want here, you could just say, you could leave this out, I guess. And then you have your email address here. So your UNZA assigned email address, right? Simple. And then more importantly, your document should have a comprehensive description of the project that you're working on. And this is really synonymous to your typical introduction, right? And with that being said, you want to ensure that it includes all those important aspects associated with an introduction. Contextualization. Provide a bit of background information linked to what you're working towards, right? Include details of the motivation for why you're doing this project, right? And more importantly, you throw in things like, I guess, the significance, why it's important that you work towards this problem, right? And no, using a reason like you're working towards this project because there are marks allocated to it is not is not considered like a significance for her doing that topic. Ideally, it's you want to think of it from the perspective of why it is important to solve that type of a problem, right? What do you hope to gain or to achieve after you're done with the project, right? But a key takeaway point really is that the description should be just a high-level overview of the problem domain that you're exploring. Remember, at this stage, you haven't really gotten to a point where you've thoroughly collected the requirements, right? That's the next phase, by the way. It's lecture series number 5, requirements engineering. So this should just be a high-level description. And essentially what you are doing is you are just expanding on the descriptions that were provided to you as part of the list of topics that were shared with you. In case people have forgotten, people always forget here. I'm just going to quickly go to the piece of document I'm referring to here so that I remind people what the thing is all about here. It says, oh my goodness. Right, so essentially what you'd be doing is you would be expanding a bit more on these descriptions that were provided to you, right? The short video descriptions. Remember, you had to choose these different topics here. So just you are rewriting and expanding more on these things here. And also, seeing as we've already opened this document here. When we discuss titles here, what I was saying is you shouldn't use this as a title. This is not a title, this is a topic, right? So you should come up with an appropriate title linked to what you're doing. The title cannot be ICT 1110 grading normalizer, no, right? All right, so high-level description of the problem domain that you're exploring, right? Then also, you must have, as part of the document, there must be a section that talks about the problem statement, right? It must be clearly stated. Again, last year in 2034, we went through a systematic process of carving out an appropriate problem statement. You must clearly state the problem that you're solving, right? And as part of the problem statement section, if you will, or subsection, what you want to do is you want to specify or state the high-level objective of what you're doing, right? The broad objective of the project itself. And then from the broad objectives, you carve out specific objectives, right? So smaller objectives that you can easily work towards. Yeah. And of course, the golden thread in all of this is this artifact that you're developing. So you want to think of what you're doing in terms of this artifact that you're going to be designing and implementing, right? And of course, the research questions will be a direct mapping of these specific objectives. So if you come up with 3 or 4 specific objectives, you must have 4 corresponding research questions. And the idea really behind the research questions, again, this is a revision of 2034, is you're using them as a guide, right, as you're embarking on this project. And in fact, they're going to inform the sort of like techniques that you're going to employ as you are doing the researchy part of what you're doing here, right? So when you get to a stage where you finish the design and implementation of the artifact, for instance, what sort of studies or experiments are you going to conduct to assess the relative success of the project itself? The research questions will guide what you need to do, right? And also, what you probably want to include in the problem statement as well is a set of preliminary requirements, because it turns out that by just reading this short description associated with whatever topic you're working towards, you already have an idea of potential requirements that are associated with what you're working towards, right? So the requirements engineering process that you're going to work towards is essentially just going to be refining what is here, right? Confirming and maybe to some extent excluding some things that would be relevant, right? So as part of this problem statement, you probably want to include details of the preliminary set of requirements associated with your chosen topic. Why did I choose to do the screencast in 0304? I don't know. All right. And then you need to include a related work section, obviously. Talked about this in the previous screencast. Remember when I talked about forward chaining and backward chaining? And the idea behind related work, literature review, literature synthesis, literature survey, background, whatever you want to call it, is you want to demonstrate to people that you've looked at what other people have done and you've identified potential gaps and hopefully flaws that exist in existing work, right? Related work. So with that being said, this should be a critique of what actually exists, right? It's not enough for you to, this is a problem that most students will make, right? It's usually the case that their related work section will be a data dump, right? So you just go out there, you find a piece of work, and then you describe or you rewrite what was done by people. No, it's not enough for you to rewrite. You need to critique, right? You need to be able to identify the gaps that exist in existing literature. You need to be able to explicitly state how existing work relates to what you're doing, right? Which is, well, there has to be a reason why it's related to what you're doing, right? You need to link it to what you're doing. Often around here. Right. It's usually the case that most people typically use some sort of a table to really provide some sort of comparative matrix between the different pieces of work that you come across, right? Usually as part of a summary in the related work section itself. But key thing here is you need to go out there, hunt for related work, right? And then you write it down. So the first starting point is you go and look for related work. And the question is, where do you look for related work? Well, again, 2034, you were taught how to do this. Gone are the days when you had to go to the library, by the way. You won't find anything in the library. What you want to do is you want to make use of a good starting point is academic databases, right? Because most of these problems that we're working towards have probably, in one way or the other, they've probably already been written about. Or maybe some of them haven't really, but there's bound to be existing work that exists out there, right? So good starting point is academic databases such as Google Scholar, ACM Digital Library, Satsia, A-Minor, there's a whole host of them out there. I mean, some people probably lump in academia.edu here or ResearchGate, but it turns out that Google Scholar is the perfect starting point because what Google Scholar does is they index so-called gray literature, right? So you pretty much find everything on Google Scholar, at least most of the content really. If you go on Google Scholar and you search for, Lighton, I guess, I don't know if you'd want to, well, search for me, I suppose. What you will find is that content that you find in here is content that is in these more mainstream academic databases, yeah. But also you find content coming in from institution sites, right? So if you notice, this is coming from UCT. This is coming from my website, right? Yeah, you see lighton.org there. So this is well, take our point here is that with Google, this is coming from a list domain, right? If you notice here, list.unza.zm. This is the lecture slide. So key takeaway point here is academia.edu. Key takeaway point here is that, look at this. This is ICT 11.10. Key takeaway point is that Google Scholar pretty much indexes, could say it indexes most of the content, right? So a good starting point would be Google Scholar. If I were you, I would actually use Google Scholar. This is interesting. Good stuff. Okay. This is wrong link here. I don't know what I was thinking about. But so and readers, you're searching for content on Google Scholar. I'm not sure if this was introduced to us in 2034. There's a couple of things you can do to refine your search, right? So you can facet the search based on year, right? You can filter out irrelevant aspects. So for instance, you can filter out citations so that you only include content, right? You can filter out patents I would filter out patents if I were you, or maybe not. I suppose, I don't know. But the feature that I find extremely useful myself is is uh, filtering content by year, right? You always want to make sure that you exclude content that was generated, let's say, decades ago, right? The whole idea behind research is you're building up on what has already been done, and so you're better. With that being said, you're better off looking at starting off with or restricting your search to, let's say, the last 5 years or something, unless if you're working in a very obscure area, right? What else? Let's see. Something else you can do is, as part of Google Scholar, you can, seeing as we're on Google Scholar here, and I do encourage you to do this, you can actually filter out content based on, just go there. You can actually filter out content based on certain subfields, right? So if you go under metrics, what you notice is that Google Scholar has come up with categories associated with different domains or fields, right? I do highly encourage you to go under the engineering and computer science. And when you go there, you notice that you should have access to, no, it's not there. I thought there was software engineering, which is a bit strange here. I wonder where this is. Engineering, software engineering, computer science. Let's see. I guess it's bad subcategories. Okay, so click on the subcategories here, right? And then you should be able to find software systems, software engineering or something. Right, so you can actually browse through content by field, right? In certain instances, I guess you might want to go to education technology, because if you notice, most of these problems that we're working towards are more linked to educational technology, right? So you could probably just filter out or browse through these different publications and then perform more targeted searches, right? But again, an open-ended search in here should be fine, right? So for instance, if you are working on a problem that is linked to resource recommendation, for instance, I would probably say student recommend resource recommend or something, right? I don't know, something. Oh, sorry, student resource recommender. It's probably bad. Oh wow, this is interesting. There we go. This looks interesting, although it's like 12 years old or something. But so bottom line is an open-ended search is probably okay, right? But there is more, right? It's not just Google Scholar. What you can do is you can perform this search by going to more focused academic databases. And what better way than to go to the Associated Computing Machinery Digital Library, right? If you go there, what you will notice is that you're presented with an interface that allows you to filter, right? To browse through by topic. So you probably want to focus more on the software engineering component. But again, the ACM Digital Library also has, it also allows you to search for content, so you can issue a search query, right, that perhaps is more linked to what you're working towards, right? There's also Sightseer, but again, listen, this whole thing, Sightseer X, what you will notice is that what you'll notice from Google Scholar is that Google Scholar, I hope I'm right here, but Google Scholar also indexes content. I know I'm right. Google Scholar also indexes content from Sightseer, right? So if you search for Sightseer X here, you notice that boom, all this content is coming in from Sightseer, right? So maybe searching for content through Sightseer will ensure that you don't go through a process of going through all these paginated results, right? Because it's a more focused database. So take your pick. If you want, you can do a more focused search by going to these respective academic databases. But bear in mind that really Google Scholar, right, or platforms like Microsoft Academic Search, for instance, will typically index most of the academic content, right? So in all likelihood, the searching through Sightseer X, for instance, or Sightseer, would bring up results that you'd get if you were to issue the same or similar query from within Google Scholar, Microsoft Academic Search, right? And with that being said, I mean, Microsoft Academic Search is similar to Google Scholar, right? Microsoft Academic Search. It's similar to Google Scholar, right? It's a Microsoft version, I suppose, of Google Scholar. You might want to issue queries there as well. I should have included this in the slides, but talking about it right now anyway. Might be helpful, might not be helpful. I do encourage you to experiment with all these different sources, right? Key thing about literature review, literature synthesis is it must be exhaustive, right? And what better way of conducting a more exhaustive literature, why is this happening? Literature review exercise than searching for content from various academic databases, right? And by the way, this whole academic search engine war is similar to the normal search engine war that we have, right? Or Bing versus Google. In this case, it's Google Scholar versus Microsoft Academic Search, for instance. It's a Sightseer. It's one and the same, right? So you can do the same thing here, search for software engineering. It would be nice if we could, experimentation in software engineering. It would be nice if we could do a comparison, I guess, experimentation in software engineering. Well, so what I'm trying to do is here to try and compare, right? Compare the results that come up here with those that come up when I go to Google Scholar. Oh, Jesus. If I go to Google Scholar and paste in experimentation software engineering, you notice similar results, more or less, I suppose. Yeah, you notice the first result is actually the same book here, right? Classic book, by the way. Beautiful book here. Anyway. On with it. So I guess besides the list that is in the slides, add on Microsoft Academic Search here, right? Microsoft Academic Search, but there's more, by the way. Sightseer, and then if you want, you can go for other academic databases or other platforms like A-, right? I like A- because they curate content based on fields as well, right? So you can filter content based on the various. I haven't really logged on to A- in a while here, but you can facet, or you can conduct a more focused search by narrowing down to a specific field that you're interested in. It's taking a bit of time here, but it's busy. All right. Well, the interface has changed. I haven't logged on to this for a couple of months now, I think. Is this? Don't even know why the login button is here, which is a bit weird. Oh, there we go. But anyway, the interface is, you notice that these platforms that we're talking about have something in common, right? The site is quite slow here, and that thing that they have in common is, surprise, all of them have search interface, right? So you can search through content, you can browse through content, right? There we go. I should change the mugshot there. Great. So same here, you can go and do a search, right? Experimentation in software engineering, and you should be able to come up with more or less similar results from these other platforms that we're looking at. Granted, A- is more specific to computing related content, right? And there we go. Is this the same? No, it's for A-, you notice that the outcome that was the first entry on Google Scholar and Microsoft Academic Search is the second entry here, right? Doesn't matter. I mean, content is different here. This is more focused. But the key thing here is for you to come up with a more comprehensive related work section, you want to make sure that you conduct an exhaustive or comprehensive literature synthesis or literature survey, right? And be able to critique what actually exists out there. Great. And on that note, I thought I'd just give us a bit of, again, this is revision, I know, but you will probably find it useful to gain an appreciation of how you synthesize or you read academic literature that is more technically inclined, because I would like to think that the kind of discussions we had in 2034 were more generic or more broad. It turns out that the content that you typically find in a more technically oriented academic piece of writing or writing is somewhat different from these other fields, right? It will probably be helpful for you if you go through these two pieces of writings. I highly recommend this, right? I especially like Keshav's approach to reading a paper, right? So he walks you through a 3 paths process on how to effectively synthesize content in a peer-reviewed piece of writing. Right? And this is more specific to computing, I think. So you probably want to read this. And incidentally, I think I should include this. Incidentally, I have an extract from one of these screencasts an extract from a lecture. Who is that? This is 04. Jesus, why would you send an email at 04? Okay. So if I can scroll down to how to read a paper, I should have how to. Right, there we go. So you notice that I have an excerpt here, which is, I think I should include this as supplementary work. Is a short walkthrough on Keshav's approach. We discussed this in CSE 741. You probably want to go through this as you read through the paper itself. Keshav walks you through a systematic process of how to read a paper, right? This is a computer science paper. You probably want to also read this, reading a computer science research paper. Extremely important. If you want to write a good critique of what has been done, you want to understand exactly how to synthesize content from a more technically oriented paper, right? Typically, most of these computer science or software engineering oriented papers will, in addition to the things that you typically have in a typical research paper, they'll have a component that's tagged as implementation, for instance, right? Design and implementation. And I can showcase this. If I go to, I'm going to find this in Mendeley. Okay, Mendeley. If I go to Mendeley and if I open up one of these things that I've authored that's more technically inclined, let's see which one. I know the classic Maono paper, I suppose. Holy crap. Oh, sorry, but not of automatic workflow. I'm looking for a classic computer science paper. I couldn't find it here, but let's get there. Great. So, so if you look at this paper, what you immediately realize here is that it has certain key components like, holy moly, like just do that. It will have, so it has your usual introduction, related work section, design, right? It has a design component because an artifact was implemented here, right? this is typically something that you wouldn't find in these other fields, right? So something to pay particular attention to. You notice the design has the various components associated with what was actually done: data model, storage, the curator interface. There's funny things here. Right, and then evaluation as well, right? Okay, so you want to read up on how to read a paper. This is a bit of a chicken egg problem, right? Read up on how to read a paper. So you're reading up a paper on how to read a paper, which is, I wonder if you can figure out how to read a paper by reading how to read a paper, right? Anyway, so besides the related work section, obviously you want to have a section that is going to describe what it is you're doing. So this would be like a proposed solution, right? So this should essentially be, again, a high-level description of what you are going to be building. The solution is the artifact that you're building, you're designing and implementing. So what exactly are you implementing? And yes, at this stage, we haven't gone through a thorough process of collecting or gathering requirements, but we have an idea of what it is we're working towards, right? So this would be the description that you include in here. So some other things that you want to include as part of the proposed solution section here is specifics of the methodology, right? The software development process that you're going to take advantage of. Is it the traditional waterfall model, for instance? Are you going to take an iterative approach? If so, you want to justify. A key thing here is to justify why you are going to use a chosen approach. And then also what you want to do is you want to specify details on how you are going to measure the relative success of what you're doing, right? The telltale signs here for what you need to do here is tied to things that we introduced as part of the discussion on testing. Remember what happens when you're testing? And we're not talking about unit testing here, we're talking about things like acceptance testing, right? So what are you going to use as a measure of success for what you're doing? It turns out that another aspect that should have been included here is evaluation, but we've left it out because we have not yet had a thorough discussion on evaluation. We get to discuss that towards the end, really, once we look at experimentation in software engineering. Although maybe some topics will actually touch a little bit more on that, especially once we discuss things to do with usability, for instance. Right. And then you, obviously, because part of this acceptance testing will involve you interacting with human beings, obviously. And whenever that happens in research, we know that these issues of ethics become extremely important. So you want to include those details, right? How are you going to handle issues to do with ethics, right? So ethical considerations must be included as a component in this section. All right, and again, still as part of the proposed solution here, you want to have a component associated with project management, right? It doesn't have to be a specifically tagged subsection of proposed work as project management, but this has to be there. And all the relevant aspects of project management must be included. If you remember, actually we had a thorough discussion about some of these things, if not most of them here, but the assignment itself has specifics on what aspects to include, right? So work breakdown structure, risk management, resources, the project timeline. Why is this lowercase inconsistent here? Risk management, right? So all of these things should be there. So hopefully you now understand why we were doing some of these things piecewise, right? Why we asked you as a separate assignment, although this wasn't graded, we asked you to brainstorm and come up with a list of milestones and deliverables associated with your project. Why we asked you to come up with a Gantt chart. Why we asked you to come up with a race metric. Why we asked you, right, on Friday, I think, or is it Saturday? I can't remember. Why we asked you, maybe yesterday, why we asked you to identify all potential risks associated with your project and the strategy that you going to come up with to manage the risk, right? So this is tied to risk management. And we specifically just asked you to sort of take an approach where you list the risks, then come up with the probabilities associated with those risks happening, and the potential effect that they might have, right? So small little table here. We're not doing anything complex like that's not complex really. We're not coming up with a so-called risk matrix where we have those probability scores scattered in that matrix. No, it's simple here. We're just listing down these risks, coming up with the strategies associated with the risks, right? How we plan to mitigate the risk. Essentially, we are the assignment, you know, what's expected to go in here is centered around risk management. So risk identification, risk analysis, and then risk mitigation, right? So again, the tentative structure of your document is quite basic. It's as follows. Ideally, you must have a title somewhere in your document. We're using a CM template here, so it should be trivial really. Title with a list of all project team members. All the project team members, do not include people that are not part of the project. Project description, related work section, proposed solution, anticipated outcome, references, right? And anticipated outcome really, or anticipated outcomes, you state, you try and tie aspects of the significance of what you're doing, right? What sort of things do you hope to produce at the end of it? Or I mean, one obvious thing here is the artifact, right? But besides the artifact itself, what you're going to design and implement, what else do you expect to get from the project, right? So think of things like software specification documents, for instance, manuals and source code and all those things, right? We discussed this in lecture series number 3, I believe, or is it 2? All right, and then you have a references section where you enumerate all those different prior work that was done, and perhaps things that are linked to some background reading that you've already done, maybe tools that you're going to be using, or not really tools, but techniques that you plan to be using, specific, I guess, frameworks that you intend to incorporate as part of your design and development process, right? And then obviously you probably need an appendices section. And the idea behind this is there are certain components of the project that you don't want to include as part of these individual sections. So for instance, the part where you get to include these artifacts associated with project management, some of these things, if not all of them, would have to be put at the end of the document, the appendices, right? They will appear as in the appendix section. You don't incorporate them within this particular section because they occupy a lot of space. It makes your document look horrible, really. It's not. Usually the expectation is that things like the Gantt chart and work breakdown structures and things like the list of all the risks that you've identified, these will go in the appendix section, essentially. All right, I hope this was helpful. So we just went through, just quickly walk you through some of the aspects that we expect to find in this proposal document that you're working towards, right? And again, you want to refer to this assignment document, which it has some of these things that I was talking about. But more importantly, it also has, I guess, a breakdown of the grades associated with the group proposal assignment itself, the split breakdown. Okay, so I'll see you in the next section where we get to just quickly walk through these so-called formatting guidelines. Essentially, what we'll be doing is discussing the so-called SCM template, right? All right, thanks.